So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Cattani, and I am joined today by Chris Grenzig. Chris is the founder of JAG Communities and JAG Capital Partners, which is a vertically integrated multifamily focused investment firm based in Jacksonville, Florida. Chris started investing in real estate in 2016 by attempting to flip houses in Long Island, New York. After months of failing, he attempted out-of-state flips, purchasing tax deeds, and finally found his footing in multifamily. Chris joined ventured on just over 100 units before joining Toro Real Estate Partners as their head of Florida operations. Toro purchased 4,000 units worth $300 million, with 1,000 units in Florida over 4.5 years. Chris eventually left Toro in November 2020 to start his own company, which owns and manages small to mid-sized apartment complexes in the Jacksonville MSA. JAG Communities currently owns and manages 107 units worth $15 million, one of which is Chris's first new construction deal totaling 35 townhomes. JAG has a 10-year vision to scale to 500 million assets under management. Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Quite the intro there. You got a lot, very storied career so far, but we kind of alluded to it in the beginning here. Kind of talk about, what even got you interested in real estate and kind of attempting the flips and your progression from there.
Sure. So I bounced around a little bit after college. At the time, I was cold calling at a stock brokerage company, trying to get licensed, had just gotten licensed, and my mom and my cousin had bought a flipping course. So I asked me if I wanted to come to that. I said, sure. Because right after I got licensed, I got exposed to a lot more of the stock brokerage world and just realized it was kind of scummy and not for me. So was already thinking about a way out. We were trying to flip houses nights and weekends and just wasn't really getting any traction. And as we were going along, a few months, I wanted to get out more and more. We started trying to look at doing it out of state. We just felt, it was going to be better route for us versus trying to continue to do it in New York. And through that, we met a guy by the name of John Cohen, who's one of the co-owners at Toro. Met him. He had gotten us start buying tax deeds down in Philly. So we started trying that. We drove down one weekend, drove a bunch of properties that were going up for auction, and just pretty much hated it flat out and knew it wasn't going to work. So just happened to be talking to John again. He was working on a small multifamily up in Kentucky. We got involved with that project, and then we were trying to help him more to get onto the general partnership side. So we worked on a few deals with him. And as we were working on stuff with him, I happened to just be sitting down with him one day, just chatting in general, and just kind of, very similar lives from a macro standpoint of grew up in similar areas, both played sports, both went to college. He actually worked for the same people I was working for as a stockbroker and had left for the same reasons. And he was only 5, 6, 7 years older. So it was just kind of interesting how it all worked out. And it just kind of came up that him and his partner, Don, were thinking about bringing somebody in to start helping out on some stuff at Toro. He basically said, what do you think? I said, sure, let's do it. And, basically hopped over the next week, just went in the next day, said, hey, I'm done. They said, do you want to do 2 more weeks? I was like, not really. They said, all right, sounds good. So just kind of left pretty quickly and went over there. And it was awesome. I mean, just got involved. My knowledge and learning curve went up exponentially. And it started as me doing a lot of grunt work and asset management and stuff, but eventually, kind of evolved into overseeing the one deal we had in Florida. And I was like, hey, we should look for more. What do you guys think? And they said, sure. And then we grew that up to, 1,000 units there, which is about a little over a quarter of their business when you look at the dollar value of it. We bought 7 deals. We went full cycle on 2 of those while I was there. And then when COVID hit, decided I was just going to buy a property for myself and a family member. And as we eventually found a deal down in Jacksonville, probably had a few dozen people hit me up and be like, hey, you're buying a deal. Are you leaving? What are you doing? All this stuff. And I was like, no, I wasn't really thinking about it. But as I started actually thinking about it, like, wow, it kind of put the thought in my head. I didn't really have a good reason not to. And I didn't want to look back when I turned 80, 90, 100 years old and regret not having done it. So decided I was going to leave, decided I was also going to pack my bags, move from New York to Florida to self-manage everything, and open up the JAG Capital and JAG Communities. So closed on that November 2020. We've bought 4 existing deals since then. We closed on the land for the development deal, which we're working on, and looking for more.
Sweet. I love it. What a great story. A lot to kind of get to there. So you kind of focus, we talked about in the intro, focus a little bit more on the small to mid-size, which is probably an underserved asset class at this point, honestly, because everybody just seems like they want at least 100 units and all of that. So kind of talk about how Toro shaped your strategy, your investment strategy.
Yeah. So one of my frustrations when I was at Toro was, we had third-party property managers. And then for our really heavy construction deals, we would also outsource and have an owner's rep for those construction deals. And it was, a lot of the managers we worked with were very good. Some of them not so good. And, we eventually, parted ways with them. It just always felt like a struggle to get anything going and in the way that we thought it should get done. And there was always breakdowns in communication and stuff. And there's always problems, and you're always going to have some companies or outside people that you work with. But for me, I was like, I don't know a lot of the stuff that the property management and the construction people are doing because I don't have that experience. I've never really swung the hammer, and I've never really, managed the properties. So I had always said if I was going to go off on my own, getting that hands-on experience would have been super beneficial. So as I started thinking about this whole thing back in August, September of 2020, when I started thinking about, okay, if I do leave, what is this going to look like? I was like, well, why not go down and try this out myself? Worst case scenario, like worst case scenario, I don't enjoy it and I just pivot and get another job, or, I stop doing the property management and I hire somebody. But my thought process was, like you said, so many people want 100, 150 units plus for good reason. I felt and still do feel that there is a lot of opportunity in that, kind of weird space of 10 to 100 units that I can look at a lot differently than, the doctor, the lawyer, the attorney, the house flipper, because I have the experience of those other ones. And it allows me to get the hands-on knowledge as we go through it. And as we continue to scale and acquire more, in theory, we're only going to get more efficient and, have better operations and do better. So for me, looking in that sub 100 unit space is super intentional. And the development side is actually even more intriguing because I'm not even competing against the doctor, right? What doctor, is looking to build 50 townhomes or 20 apartments, but they'll sure as hell buy a 20 unit apartment building. So again, just kind of trying to operate in a space that a lot of people either won't or can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really nailed it there, right? And that really is that kind of like that space that really allows for, you can certainly scale if you want to, and, there's a lot of room to move in that space. So you mentioned in the beginning that I think you said your mom and sister took the flipping
Mom and
course?
cousin. Yeah.
Mom and cousin. Did they come along with you as well at JAG?
No. So one of the reasons I knew Philly wasn't going to work was my mom had no desire to go down to Philly ever. So I was like, okay. And it was going to be me and my cousin, but my cousin was working a full-time finance job and was a real estate agent and was about to have his second kid.
Wow.
I was like, there's no way he's going to have enough time to be consistent. So I was like, I'm going to be driving down. And I was like, no, like I'm not doing that. And what happened was, he started focusing, his agent business blew up and he really started crushing it between the two and his family. And he kind of, stopped on the investment side. And my mom still does some stuff here and there, but she's mostly retired now and not doing too much. She does help me with like some organizational stuff, and she's really good at like wording things and grammar and stuff like that. So a lot of times I'll send her stuff to look over, but she's not like in the weeds day to day.
Awesome. I love that. That's nice that you can at least involve her. So we were talking offline. You're working on your first development deal. Also, I'm working on mine. Mine self-storage, yours is multifamily. Sounds like 20 units, if you kind of alluded to it back there. So kind of talk about, what got you, kind of intrigued by development and how that process has been so far.
So the way I got into the development was kind of what I was saying, just like, again, I know that I have competition on the existing stuff, and some of that competition will just sit on a property for 10 years and they don't think about like, what's my actual return or what's an IRR or how do I spend 15,000 to push rent $300. They're like, okay, the rent's this, and I'm buying a property. That's great. So again, trying to find more of a competitive edge. This site in particular was one that I had chased since I moved down. It's literally about 3 parcels down from the first property we bought.
Wow.
And it's a 2.5 acre site already zoned for 20 units.
Nice.
In an area, so 8 units an acre, in an area where it's very tough to build and they really don't want you to build apartments. And that's one of the reasons that I bought in this area to begin with, is the submarket has a lot of natural barriers that kind of contain the area and the submarket, and the code and the zoning is very low density. So it makes it incredibly tough for new supply, which is why there's no new apartment complexes, big or small, since like the 80s or 90s. I think there was one built in like the early 90s, a bunch of them built in the 80s.
Wow.
So it makes it really tough to build there. So I saw this site and I'm like, this is great. Nobody's looking for 2.5 acres. And it's in an area where it's really tough to build. And, we're doing incredibly well. We're about to refi out about like 70-80% of our initial equity, and it would be more, but it's just because lenders are capping us at 90%, 85% of our cost. They won't go above that. So basically we're getting like a 50% LTV loan on a refinance, which clearly we should be able to get more, 60-70%. So we're having a lot of success in that submarket. So for us, it was like, okay, well, we've already got a 16 unit, we've got a site that's already zoned for it. It makes it kind of simple to a certain degree. And what we're doing is we've underwritten the deal at 20 units. And because it's low density, we're going to do townhome rentals. But we're actually applying for a PUD right now to try to get it up to, we were shooting for 35. Now it's looking like 33. So if we can do that, it just brings our land cost down and, makes it that much sweeter.
What's a PUD?
What is that? It's either planned utility development or planned urban development. It's basically like, your blank sheet of like, you don't have to necessarily fit your development into a certain type of already zoning code. It's basically like, here's what we want to do. What do you guys think type of thing?
Okay. Makes sense. So some of the things touch on, what's the permitting process been like in terms of getting permits and kind of getting things off the ground?
Incredibly slow, like painfully slow. We were under contract for 4 months and we've only just submitted our application into the town. Part of it was on our end trying to figure out what exactly we wanted to do, but just also because it's a small town and it's kind of like buddy, things have been a little slow as well. So we are in the application process for that, of like submitting the site plan and getting engineering plans drawn up. And basically then we'll present it and see what the feedback is.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty general, I think, across most cities right now. Is it a bit of a slow process? So you mentioned that there's kind of some natural barriers in place. are they, so it sounds like they don't want a lot of growth. It sounds like it's not Jacksonville proper then, right? It's
Yeah, so
separate.
this is Orange Park. It's in Clay County, so it's literally just over the county line. So like if you talk about Jacksonville, I would include it as part of it. Like it could easily, like if you just drew the line slightly differently, you'd be like, okay, that's part of it, but it's technically not. But yeah, it is like just outside of it. So it's not the same as Duval County.
Got it. And is Jacksonville, Duval County, are they embracing the growth and putting things in place for
Yeah,
that?
Jacksonville and Duval are pretty aggressive. Like there's a decent amount of building from what I hear. Stuff is getting done. One of the big things is the downtown area that has been ripe for development, but has been blocked for years and decades, has changed because they've changed their incentive program. Problem with Jacksonville. So Jacksonville and Duval County are actually one and the same. They merged like 10 or 20 years ago. I don't remember. And Jacksonville is actually the largest city in the country by landmass. So
Wow.
like it's huge. And what happens is I think there are 17, it's like city councilors or something like that.
Jeez.
And only one of them covers the downtown. So anytime there's a vote for something to happen within the downtown area, it's 1 against 16. And you've got people that live out in the suburbs that are never going to go into the city in the downtown ever, being like, why would I spend my tax dollars for this or for that? But that has starting to been changing. You're seeing a lot more development growth, redevelopment that's been happening there and throughout the county.
Gosh, it's so interesting when politicians are, say one thing and obviously doing another, which, we could do a whole podcast just on that. Mm-hmm. Especially, as you get into development, you really start to see the inner workings and, how they don't really have anything in place to, sort of embrace all of this growth. Because if I understand correctly, Jacksonville is becoming kind of a top market. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a crazy amount of capital flowing into the city. It's kind of been Orlando's redheaded stepchild. And Tampa's too, to a certain degree. It's kind of been like the large city that nobody really talks about or goes to. I could see that potentially changing, some stuff. I think a big part of that is the downtown draw, right? You think about Nashville, Austin, Tampa, Atlanta, they've all had these kind of downtown urban development that attracts tourism and people coming in and things to do and nightlife. And Jacksonville does not really have that. Or if they do, it's very like spotty and segregated, or it's very commercialized, either one. And, if nobody really thinks to come to Jacksonville because it doesn't have any of those things really. But there's a few, either really big players. So Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, has got a bunch of different waterfront developments near downtown that are going on. And then various different players in and around town that are doing a bunch of stuff too. I could see that changing over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think a lot of people are buying into that from the standpoint of like, hey, this is, buying in on the ground floor of Atlanta. And, people have really seen how Atlanta and Charlotte and Austin have grown over the last 10, 15 years. And I think a lot of people are seeing this as like, hey, this is and could be the next spot.
What are some of the big economic drivers that are bringing people in, and what demographic is primarily moving in there?
So I think a lot of it's twofold. One, you get a lot of people from the Northeast. There's a fairly large amount, from what I understand, of finance and IT jobs coming in. Truthfully, I'm not the most knowledgeable on this, so, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But you also see some in-state migration too, as, Jacksonville is a cheaper alternative to a lot of the other cities I just mentioned, especially, South Florida, the West Coast of Florida. So you do see that as well as also coming from out of state.
Okay. Makes perfect sense. So let's kind of touch on, obviously you've got, you talked about earlier, you got in-house management. So kind of talk about, forming the partnerships, the partners that you have, what kind of led to all of that, and and, having that in-house management?
Yeah. So right now, for JAG Communities, JAG Capital is just me. I do have a partner on the development because he worked for a developer for, a few years and
Oh, nice.
understands more of the whole scope of how it works and what to do, and has the contacts and stuff that I didn't have. But other than that, it's just me and all the deals. I do have 3 people that work with me. So I was fortunate enough that our second property we acquired, I was able to, quasi inherit the on-site manager and the maintenance supervisor. And they've been super amazing to bring on and have helped me, oversee a lot less on the day-to-day side. And they kind of, run with a lot of the, most of the day-to-day property management maintenance stuff. And then also my fiance left her job about 6 to 8 weeks ago, has hopped on over, has been helping out a lot with like the marketing and, the project management stuff, which has also been huge because most of our deals we're renovating, soup to nuts, outside and inside of 24 months, if not sooner. So even though, we've got 72 existing units right now, we've in the past 18 months, we've renovated probably, or are in process of renovating at least half of those. And we should be done with the vast majority of those by the end of this year. So,
Awesome.
we have, a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, like you mentioned, that's great. You were able to inherit those 2 people. It sounds like they're overseeing all the properties now. And how many properties are these units spread across?
4.
Okay. And are they pretty like geo?
Yeah. So we've got
central?
two submarkets. So 2 in one submarket, 2 in the other. So it makes it fairly easy of, when we go to one, we can kind of hit both and, vice versa.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super important. So we kind of talked about it in the intro. Your, kind of 10-year vision is to get 500 million under assets. Talk about, kind of your strategy for the next year or so and moving forward to reach that goal.
Yeah. So when I alluded to it a little bit, but when I was under contract on that first property and debating about this whole thing, I spent a lot of time thinking about, what is the future? How does that look? How do we get there? Things of that nature. So I have a whole 10-year breakdown of like what we're acquiring, how much we're acquiring, roughly how much revenue that is bringing in, how much staff we roughly have, how much equity is going to be required, how much GP equity is going to be required. And it's, it's a ramp up, right? It's compounding returns. So our first year goal was to hit 5 million. Second year was to acquire 8 million. Year 3 is 13, so on and so forth, with the last year acquiring 200 million. And basically it breaks down as us acquiring a total of roughly 640 million, selling off roughly 100 million and giving us a, $40 million buffer there. And the idea is basically, hey, we're going to start on smaller to mid-size assets for the reason of, I think there's some better opportunities in today's environment. It's less resources needed, less partners needed, gives us a chance to kind of get our feet underneath us and build the foundation in the operations, and as well kind of create returns and wealth and money that we can then parlay into bigger deals as we go forward. So when we buy $200 million worth of real estate in 8 years from now, I am not buying $108 million properties. We'll probably, buy 2 to 5 deals, in that range. And they're going to be, 100, 150 units plus, 200 units plus, because they are more efficient and easier to manage. And it does make sense, but we're going to ramp our way up to that.
Awesome. I love that. That's a great plan. And sounds like you've got it all mapped out. So do you have investors currently on these deals, or did you kind of bootstrap it all yourself?
Yeah. So the first 2 deals were a large portion of my own capital and then 2 different family members. And really it was, the first deal we were just buying for ourselves. The second deal came up kind of quick, but I also didn't want to raise money because it still felt a little too early, still figuring things out, still getting things going. And then intentionally took several months away. Basically, we bought the first 2 within the first 3 or 4 months. The rest of that year, we didn't acquire anything, and kind of intentionally said, like, we're going to kind of knuckle down, focus, really make sure we have everything underneath us before we go and get anything else. And then the later half of 2021, we put under contract the land, our next 20 unit deal. And then we just bought a 12 unit deal that was like around the corner from the 20 unit, like rinse and repeat. It's a little bit on the smaller side of what I would like, but just unreal location. Basically, most of the investors kind of just doubled up on it. It was kind of pretty easy to just do the same, almost the same deal twice. So it made it kind of nice.
Awesome. Love that. And are you still friends and family? Or are you starting to get referrals and kind of build an investor base?
Yeah, I would say a large portion of it is friends, family, colleagues that I've known for a long time. But we do have, people that are signing up for our investor list, people that have shown interest that I don't know yet. And, we're establishing that relationship before we raise money and stuff. But we're starting to really open that up more. And, eventually when we raise money for the development, that'll probably be, $2 to $3 million. We'll really open that up to everybody and see how that goes.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we are coming up close to time here. So I have 5 questions that I ask all of my guests. It's the final 5. The first question is, what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
It's the best advice is probably it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much as you think.
Oh, how true those words are.
Yeah.
And you don't realize till you get in it and you're like, oh, that's what this means.
Exactly.
What is it about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
So part of the reason that I even wanted to do the in-house management and stuff is I had a lot of friends and like even just build a company. I have a lot of friends and family that were working jobs that they really hated and wanted to get out of. And it's one of the reasons I stayed at Toro for as long as I did. Because when I initially got in, it was a bridge to doing my own thing. They always kind of knew that was my goal. And I don't think any of us thought I was going to stay there for over 4 years, but I did. And part of that reason was because they were just really great people to work for and with. And I had thought a few times about leaving, but never really did because I had friends that'd be like, they'd come home and be like, my boss or this and that and all the shit that they didn't like. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, maybe it's not my picture perfect idea of what my job would look like, but I'm actually doing okay. Like I'm fine. And I think for me, creating that environment for as many people as I reasonably can is something that, I'm really trying to do. So when I just sat down with, one of our team members and had that talk about, like how things are going and what's going on. And, she kind of gave me a lot of that feedback that I felt about Toro, that really made me feel good. And it's what I'm really striving for.
Awesome. I love that. That's great. What's your favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
We've been reading a ton, and I say me and my fiance have been reading a ton of Brandon Sanderson books. So there are a lot of like very world building, I guess like sci-fi fantasy type stuff. And he's got dozens and dozens of books. So all of his have been really great.
Awesome. Love that. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know if I have an answer for you. I think I'll have to think about it.
Flying, time travel. Someone said underwriting once. Empathy. I got empathy once. That was another really good one.
Yeah, I guess, I thought about that, my first thought was like, trying to read people's thoughts, but then I was like, that's an invasion of privacy. Like, I guess empathy is a pretty good one. I don't know. Strength would be pretty nice. Not having to worry about lifting stuff. God forbid there's an emergency, you can save some people.
Totally. Love it. Last one. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Yeah. Easiest way is probably email. So whether it's, you're curious about investing, you just want to hit me up for resources, you got a deal in Jacksonville, you want a second pair of eyes on, or, anywhere, happy to be of assistance, or just want to connect for whatever reason. It's Chris at JAG-Communities.com. That's also our website, which is hopefully done. We've been doing a bit of a rebranding, so it'll be jag-communities.com. And then our capital investor facing side is, jagcapitalpartners.com, which isn't up yet, but hopefully by the time this goes live or shortly thereafter, it will be up. So feel free to go check those out. Or if you want to just, connect with me on social media, just search Chris Grenzig, but the main ones are Instagram at Chris.Grenzig or LinkedIn.
Sweet. We will link the website in the show notes. I'm sure, like you said, by the time this airs, should be good to go. Chris, thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.